of the September 26th Historic Preservation Commission meeting to order. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Coleman?
Present.
Ms. Herring?
Present.
Mr. Nicely?
Here.
Ms. Riviera?
Here.
Ms. Van Gundy?
Here.
Councilman Rohr?
Here.
Chairman Hatton?
Here. Number 2 on the agenda, this has been tabled, waiting for a full commission, which we appear to have today. Election of officers. Annually, we elect a chairperson and vice chairperson. I have been vice chairperson. I've been serving as chairperson since our chairperson resigned. So we will need to elect each of those. Do I hear, first of all, we probably should take this up off the table. So I would need a motion to do that.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call the vote on that, please.
Who seconded?
Joe Coleman.
Okay.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Herring? Mr. Nicely?
Yes.
Ms. Riviera?
Yes.
Ms. Van Gundy? Yes. Councilman Rohr?
Yes.
Chairman Hatton?
Yes. With that, 2A, chairperson. Do I hear nominations for chairperson?
I would like to nominate Mark Hatton for chair.
Your second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any other nominations? Would the clerk call the roll?
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Herring?
Yes.
Mr. Nicely?
Yes.
Ms. Riviera?
Yes.
Ms. Van Gundy?
Yes.
Councilman Rohr?
Yes.
And Chairman Hatton?
Yes. 2B, we need a nomination for vice chair. Someone like to make that motion? Mr. Nicely?
I'd like to nominate Joe Coleman for that position.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. The clerk, please call the roll.
Do you accept?
Sure.
You were kind of quiet. Okay. Let's see here. Well, Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Nicely?
Yes.
Ms. Riviera?
Yes.
Ms. Van Gundy?
Yes.
Ms. Herring?
Yes.
Councilman Rohr?
Yes.
And Chairman Hatton?
Yes. Thank you. Number 3 on the agenda, approval of motion summary of the HPC commission meeting, the HPC meeting held August 22nd as recorded and transcribed. We do have the summary in your packet. And hopefully folks have had a chance to look that over. Any additions, comments, edits? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion, second from Ms. Riviera. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Herring?
Vote.
Yes.
Mr. Nicely?
Yes.
Ms. Riviera?
Yes.
Ms. Van Gundy?
Abstain.
Councilman Rohr?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Coleman?
Yes.
Chairman Hatton?
Yes. All right, number 4A, under regular business, 2018-2382, a request by Indus Hotels for a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of existing structures and construction of a hotel at 7 and 27 Spring Street, which are zoned B3, which is a community business district, and located in the transitional subdistrict of the Downtown Historic District overlay. Staff, do you have a report? Staff? All right. While we're waiting for staff to return, if the applicants would like to go ahead and step up, since that will be part of this, so we'll get you up here. I just looked over and there's I don't know, I was emailing with Deb. I thought he was going to be here, but I thought I saw his car out there. Where's Linda? No, Diane. Diane. She's been gone for 6 weeks and you forgot her name. kept going, maybe I'm just not hearing it. Okay.
My apologies.
That's all right.
There's a tiny little computer issue, so if you could just give me 1 minute.
Okay,
I'm gonna go fix a printer, and then I'll be right back.
sure.
Diane. So, I'm sorry. I really do apologize. Excuse me.
Diane.
Yeah.
Time got away. I'm sorry, we are doing case A, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to use that? It's been a while since Diane's been. Got some new toys.
New
Play with?
technology.
Okay.
All right. My apologies.
No worries.
Okay. The first case is HPC 2018, request for a certificate of appropriateness for demolition and hotel site redevelopment for 7 and 27 Spring Street. And I believe many times with the informal reviews, everyone's familiar with the maps and the historic references, the current site pictures. And this is the final presentation, taking into account all of HPC's recommendations and suggestions to date.
Can you speak up, please?
Certainly. And from what I am understanding, you're speaking with Dave Eflin and reviewing the videos of the case.
Diane, if I could, since I know we have some new folks maybe here in the audience, when you make references, for instance, to Dave Eflin, could you let us know his title and maybe make sure that we go through a little background? I know everyone here has talked to the applicants a couple of times now, but perhaps not everyone in the audience is up to speed on that. So if I could ask you to do that, please.
Back up. Okay, the applicant, Indus Hotels, had approached the city of Delaware for potential redevelopment of the properties located at 7 and 27 Spring Street. There are currently 2 two buildings located on that site. And the site is located on Spring Street, directly behind the Ross Art Museum, near the intersection of Spring and South Sandusky. The zoning of the property is currently B3, Community Business District. It lies within the transitional sub-district of the historic district. And here is an aerial photograph that shows those two existing buildings. There are two historic references illustrated here. The first is the Allen Hotel that was located on North Sandusky Street in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And the design of the new hotel is giving a nod to that historic hotel. And the other photo illustrated here, this is the Anthony family. They were immigrants from France who operated a brewery on that corner of Spring and Sandusky. And these are the current buildings located on that site, the Napa Auto Parts building, and then to the east of that is another building that's used as auto repair and storage. And these buildings were built, I believe it was in the 1920s. And then these are additional views. Okay, and throughout the process, the applicants had appeared before HPC to gather input on design and materials and so forth. And taking the comments and suggestions of HPC into account, they are presenting their final presentation tonight of the proposed hotel. And Dave Eflin is the Director of Planning and Community Development, and he had undertaken this project. And so I'm here to help finish it up. And so this, as I had mentioned, the final proposal is to demolish the two buildings that were illustrated. And the Hampton Inn by Hilton will be constructed. It will be a 6-story, 118-room hotel to be developed on the 4-parcel site. And the final presentation will include a cast stone base in limestone finish, masonry accents, sills and bands, and precast concrete, an antique bronze finished metal accent, and brick for the majority of the building to be in the Madison Blend soft rose as discussed with HPC. The brick accent in the building center portion will be a dark iron spot with a vertical score. And the site parking plan illustrates the building setback. And then also included in the plans are additional detail on the lighting that was requested. And here we go. I'll just use this. No, I use this. All right. And Warren, I'm not sure whether you would like to take the wheel on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Would you like to, I think my presentation comes up a little bit larger.
Sure. Okay.
This one?
That's it.
While we're getting that queued up, I just wanted to, again, I know we have some folks here in the audience that weren't involved, but this is the third meeting. The first two meeting the applicants were at were informal reviews. And it's also important that what the HPC does, to minimize it a little bit, but essentially our concern is with the design. It's not whether there should be a hotel there. We have no purview over any other zoning other than the design part. So this, and I would ask our council rep to correct me if I'm wrong, this would still have to go through planning and it 1 to 3 readings depending. Is that correct at the planning level?
I don't know if the planning commission, but 3 readings at council.
Okay, so once planning commission approves, they may certainly go back and say, we want to make other changes. There's some zoning considerations that'll come into this that'll have to be changed. Once that's done, it will then go in front of council. And as our council rep said, generally there's 3 readings at council, so there will be plenty of time for public input. I know just from informal discussions, this is certainly a big project for our downtown area. And I'm sure a lot of folks are going to have some thoughts and input on that. But
Project of this magnitude at the first reading, we would typically schedule a public hearing for the second reading at 7:30 or
Okay.
at a fixed time for everybody to come in that wants to speak on the project.
Okay, great. So again, tonight what we're doing is really kind of finalizing the design that we've spent a couple of months working back and forth with the applicants. The other part of this is they are asking for a demolition approval, and that also starts at HPC, but ultimately has to be approved by council as well. So just to kind of give you a timeline and a lay of the land a little bit. And with that, I think, are we ready to go? Okay.
So I'm Warren Bath. I'm the project architect with OHM Advisors. OHM Advisors is located at 580 North 4th Street, and that's Columbus, Ohio, 43215.
I'm David Kozar with Indus Hotels. We're located at 1555 Lennoxtown Lane, Columbus, Ohio, 43212.
Thank you.
So the first slide, we're showing the proposed hotel, how it's positioned on the site, which for this hotel to operate correctly, we're proposing a 25-foot offset from the back of the sidewalk. This slide also shows how we're proposing parking would work for the hotel.
I'm sorry, what did you say? What is it? What, I didn't understand what you said. About the parking?
There's for the hotel, there's proposed parking both across the street in the 2 lots there and on the street. We're not really going for parking approval at this point in time. We're really just doing the design, but we're including this just for the discussion. These are the materials that have been selected for the building. Versus the colors on the slides, I would suggest everyone take a look at the actual samples. But we're looking at an antique bronze for all the metal trims, and the windows, Madison blend, just kind of like a soft rose, dark iron spot for the middle, has a vertical score just to create some nice textures. The base is going to be a cast stone limestone. We're looking at precast sills. We're proposing doing some painted signage on the end corner. The windows will have an integrated P-tack system so that the grille doesn't stand out. It looks like it's part of the window. This is new to the proposal, and that would be the lighting. Just looking at doing an industrial kind of gooseneck, also an antique bronze, that would be at the lower base, so at the more pedestrian levels. And then the more basic lighting for the building is just gonna be some soft up and down lights that are on the pilasters of the building, just to kind of highlight them, and the cornice. And this, we also included the profile for the cornice because that was just a comment from last time. So these are the elevations. This is the north elevation, front of the building. The building's basically broken up into 3 bays, with the more traditional ends kind of bookending the center. The building is basically composed of pilasters that run vertically and then lines that kind of carry the eye horizontally to keep the building feeling like it's not dauntingly tall. So this is the end condition, east elevation. This elevation is really mostly about how we articulate it and how it's not flat. We're proposing doing some ghosted windows, some recessed panels, carrying the horizontal lines around the building. Try and give it some depth and some scale. And this is the south elevation. This one's mostly hidden, but we still have the same articulation from the other elevations. And the west elevation, similar to the east elevation. Now this is a more detailed look at the porte cochere and what goes in there. It's a pretty simple porte cochere, just some steel trimming, all metal. It's all done in the antique bronze. The posts are kind of these thin, spindly steel with some concrete footings. And the proportions and the general look to this was coming from the Allen Hotel. It doesn't have all the intricate, I guess, lace iron detailing. It's kind of a more clean, I'll call it contemporary version of that.
Are the tall concrete bases to kind of emulate more of like the limestone foundation? Is that why you didn't run those all the way down to near grade?
It was just a try. It does do that, but it's also just to break up the line of it. So it's not just this super long line that's coming down.
Okay.
Kind of gives it more of a scale.
So it's a design choice, not a
Exactly.
engineering. Okay. And the concrete's plain, not colored or
No,
aggregate or
it's
anything?
not colored. I was proposing a kind of like an octagon shape to it. So it has some profile, some edge. It's not just going to be like a light post.
Right, yeah.
So it does have some articulation.
Okay.
This elevation is about context. We're showing how the hotel compares to the campus center behind it. It is taller than the campus center, but with grade and the context, it really is
Shorter.
It's
It's actually shorter.
Is it actually shorter?
Yeah, actually shorter.
my mistake.
Yeah.
Right, so the elevation is just to show how the building fits into its context. And these are more renderings that are attempting to do the same. This is the view from Spring. What is that? I'm sorry, the Corner Street. That's Sandusky.
Sandusky, right?
And this is the view from Franklin. More renderings. So these elevations, you can see the lights, how those are arranged. The heavier gooseneck lights are down at the base, and then we just have the simple up and down lights on the pilasters.
Which ones are up and which ones are down? I'm assuming obviously the ones up higher are down, but the uplighting, is it just on that lower cornice
So,
band of it, essentially?
These little lights here that are on the pilaster,
Yeah,
they're up and down lights.
okay,
They're not super bright. They're
okay,
just enough to cast some light on the pilaster so that it'll be highlighted at night.
okay,
These ones at the lower base, those are the goosenecks.
right. But the uplights, or you said the up and down, are only going to be essentially at that band between the first and the second story, or do we this,
So right now, I've got them in the middle,
okay,
right here, and then one up at the top.
okay,
Because we weren't trying to, we know that light pollution was a pretty large concern.
right.
So we're just really trying to softly accent the building at night.
And that's actually an area that is still, with LED technology, is evolving so fast, it's a little difficult for us to create good code around it. So will this be, I assume at this point, that'll be probably LED lights?
I would assume, yes.
Okay. So the one, while it's not in there, the one request I would make is to make sure that those are on the warmer side, under 3,000, like 2,700. I'm pretty sure that's the look you guys want anyway. But I say that because if you look around downtown, we do have a few that, suddenly look like Audi headlights. They're so white, and that's, not what we want. I'm assuming it's not what you
I
want.
agree. A warmer palette
Okay.
would be
All right.
preferred.
And we don't, if you look around downtown, we have down lighting mostly as signage. We don't have a lot of lighting that accents buildings. So this is also a little bit of a new area for us. We do at the county building, obviously. But that's to your point, we don't want that so that if you're walking on the sidewalk and look up, do that kind of thing, right? Okay. And then just one more point. So it looks like there was a couple of changes made. I'm going to continue calling it a awning or a canopy, just the way I'm going to be. Is lighting, so the materials haven't changed since we met, at least what we agreed upon really the last time, right? So the lighting's really the only thing, and a little bit on the porte cochere.
The corner share actually didn't change. I just added
I think
information.
yeah, okay,
The only thing else that was added in the presentation was the lighting.
Okay.
And the cornice profile.
okay. That was more for information, right?
Correct.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
That and the portrait share. It hasn't changed. It's just I added information.
Okay. Commission members, questions either for city staff, we sort of went past that, but at this point we probably don't, or for the applicants?
Just, a couple call outs since we're talking about demolition of a couple buildings downtown, which generally we are loath to do and approve. I think, probably the one condition that's spelled out in the standards that might, that this probably meets is the historic significance of the buildings. They were pretty, pretty plain to begin with. Nonetheless, they've also gone through some changes over the years that I think have, taken away what character and, what architecture they had. And then also the fact that it's in the sub-district. But the reason I bring that up is just, because I think it needs to be, part of the discussion that we generally are very, reticent about demolishing buildings in the district. The other thing, again, is it is in the sub-district, so it's not as prominent an area as it would be if it was in the downtown core district. And then the other thing is, that the variance is necessary with the height and exceeding the 4-story limit. And again, I think there's a unique situation here in that the site plan where it's essentially nestled into a very large hill, and it's next to a building that has a very, very high profile already, the Ham Will building. That to me is something that, again, I think I would be very concerned about normally, something like this going in downtown and granting a variance or at least, voting for that kind of variance. But I think the unique location of the building and the attributes of the site, as well as its juxtaposition to the Hamwell building, to me, make that palatable. But again, I think that's important to call out because these are things that normally we generally, discourage and are not in the standards. That said, I think you guys came back with a really good plan based on the first iteration to the second iteration and the final plan before us. I'm just really, I think it's a good looking building and it doesn't seem out of character. The one other thing that I would also mention though is with the staff recommendations that we are granting approval for demolition. I wonder that we might want to consider making that conditional on you receiving all the other approvals you'll need with the city. My one concern would be that we approve this and now you've got the approval for demolition and at some point the rest of the project gets hung up on whether it's parking or planning or something else, and then all of a sudden there's no hotel, but we've got 2 vacant lots now that hadn't existed before. So I think that would be something that we might want to incorporate into the whatever motion we put forward.
Yeah, good point. Can I ask you to bring the samples up? Ms. Van Gundy was not at the last meeting. And anyone else that wants to take a look again. Excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, if I could also just
Please.
to build on what Commissioner Coleman just said regarding the 2 standards by which we're allowed to grant a demolition. The first one does read, the structure contains no features of architectural or historic significance. And then just for the record, I know it's put into the report already that staff so excellently collaborated to put together. Thank you. But it does say the 7 Spring Street was built in 1923. There was a question earlier. As a parking garage, later converted to a regular structure, shop in 1950, and then 27 Spring Street was built in its current form in 1923 as well. And so that gives us sort of a frame for the people that are here with us today of what historical quality or lack thereof it does have.
Right. Any other comments, questions? The applicants or staff?
I'm okay.
Anything else from the applicants today?
I have a question, if I may. What's the difference between the historical district and what you said they were the sub?
Yeah, so what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you guys can sit down, I ask you to come up and you do have to give us your name and address for the record. That way we can make sure we hear you and you can hear us.
Would it be possible to put the map up on the screen? Good idea.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Patricia Gass. My home is 81 Mason Avenue, but I am here because I own the property at 3236 Spring Street
Okay.
and across the street.
Okay.
So I'm very interested in this project.
Okay.
And that's why I have always understood that my building was in the historic district.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're talking about the sub-historic district?
So I don't know if you can make that any bigger. So the historic district has different components to it, and everything in red is the core district, and that essentially is on Sandusky. There are some exceptions, as you can see. There's also essentially it's non-core or transitional. And so I don't know, do we have the color? I can't read that. Even with glasses, I can't read. So,
The orange and
yeah,
yellow.
so if you look up here, and I don't know if you can read that. The red, can you pull it down so we can see the whole district? Is that possible?
That's
All right, we'll focus on this part. So Sandusky, pretty much everything on Sandusky is in the core. That's held to a little bit higher standard because those buildings are generally in the 1880s. They're very much intact. So they're held to a little different standard than the transitional district would be. Though they're still part of the HPC, so if you wanted to do work on your building, you would come in front, or your contractors or whoever would come in front as part of the permit process. But because you're in the transitional district, there is a little more leeway in the design.
Okay.
Did that answer your question? That
Yes,
part of it at least?
but I also had a question when they were
Uh-huh.
talking about the parking.
Mhm.
Is there parking is the parking going to be right in front of the hotel?
So if you can pull that up. So while she's pulling it up, and just to make sure, all we do here at the Historic Preservation Commission is focus on the design of the building.
Well, I understand
Okay.
that, but I thought the way the design, he talked about parking as part of the,
He was showing the overall and was just showing where it is. So when it goes in front of planning, they will definitely look at parking. And then when it goes to council, they will also, and obviously that's going to be you're not the only one who will bring that subject up. I'm pretty sure.
believe me, I bet I'm going to be bringing that more than almost anybody else.
Okay. So I think, and I'll defer to the
So
applicant.
like here, where is that supposed to be like, you can pull in front of the hotel? Is that the idea?
Correct. So that will be 2 curb cuts, so they can pull in, drop people off, drop luggage off, and go off.
Okay.
Okay? And feel free, by the way, with the applicants if I'm missing anything. But, so they have looked at these 2 lots, and my understanding is as part of the purchase of this parcel includes those 2 lots. So they will own those 2 lots, pave them, because we don't allow gravel lots, they'll be paved, marked. There's a lot of different parts that how much you have room to turn around. So, and that's not us, again, that's really planning and city council to look at that. So you can see, if you can, they've got 16 spaces in that one, 17 spaces in that. And then they also counted just all of the available on-street parking. And I can't speak for the applicant, we can definitely have them come back up. But the idea being that's what they look at as available parking right within the very district or within a block of their.
So they're planning on 16 parking places in the parking lot next to mine,
Okay.
where I have a 12-foot easement to get into the back of my property.
Okay.
Pardon me?
I think it's 8 miles.
No, I just looked at the deed the other day, I think it's, and then the electric and the gas things all run through there too.
Okay. So again, that's well outside
Yeah.
our purview. And certainly you can talk to staff. Dave Eflin is the director, your council rep. But at this point with us, we don't really have anything to do with that. I think the applicants just wanted to show that they were thinking of it.
Okay, so it would have parking and then okay. All right, that answers my question.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else from the community, from the audience, like to speak? Okay. Applicants, have we sort of moved you off? Do you have anything else that you wanted to add while you were
Applicants for us.
Actually, before you get too rested.
Oh, wait, you had a question, thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
My question was just with the mortar on tuck pointing between the 2 transitions of brick. Is it going to be the same, or is there going to be a variation with the darker brick?
So the darker brick, I think we would want it to be more monolithic.
Okay.
More of the same color. And with the rose, I think, I haven't really thought about what that mortar color is, but it's probably more of a lighter white color.
That's my question.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mr. Coleman?
Speaking of parking, even though the actual, configuration of the parking and, number of spots is, aren't strictly speaking in our purview, as you will be taking ownership of those 2 lots and converting those to parking, as the chair indicated, they would need to be paved. What is the plan for any streetscaping or landscaping of those areas, or how are they just going to be open parking lots, or are you going to have some treatment to dress them up a little bit?
I think honestly, right now it's really early in the planning process.
I think a lot of it had to deal too with the frontage part of it and working with the city and what this new streetscape was going to look like as well too, and kind of letting that dictate a little bit of what goes on inside too. But the plans are to have as much as we can put in there for sure.
Yeah. So for staff, at such time as they, should the project, go forward, at such time as they develop parking areas, would that be a separate application to come before HPC? We're talking about the building right now, but those are different lots. So would that be a different proposal or application at some point?
Right, being, as you indicated, it's on a separate parcel. We would have you come back and present the site plans for those particular parcels then. And the standards indicate, for parking lots that the frontage should be screened.
Okay. Thank you.
Good call. Anyone else?
I just wanted to just kind of take stock of what are the various variances that are involved in our decision on this. And so I'm going to list the ones I think that I've seen, and if there are any others, maybe we can just compile a list so we have a clear understanding of what it is we're granting variances on. One of which obviously is the number of stories being in the historic or the transitional subdistrict. This obviously exceeds the limit of 2 stories. The 25-foot, was it, offset from the curb would be another variance. I'm wondering about the signage that's proposed on the east elevation, if that would also be a variance. I think it would be, wouldn't it?
The painted?
Yeah, the painted
Yes,
sign
it
up on
would
the
We
multiple height stories.
Signage.
Okay.
At this time, we wouldn't do that as a separate thing. It's really just a
Okay.
conceptual
Okay.
thought of what we'd like to do with that.
Okay, good, thank you. Those are the main variances I can see that I can think of. So if anyone has any others, that would be good to kind of just make those very clear.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Probably the integrated P-tax would be something that we haven't approved before. I don't know that we've been asked that before, but it's certainly not in, it would not fit our normal window regulations, so.
I think that because it's in the transitional district, there's a little bit more leeway. And so the question of whether or not it's changed to the core district might be an issue that would require more variances because the core district guidelines are more detailed and strict. So it's something to think about.
Yeah, and just for, so David discussed that at the last 2 meetings, that they may actually change the zoning around that as well.
Correct. And my opinion for this, for air conditioning, it's considered a mechanical, and typically those are screened. And I think what's being presented is already a screened type of mechanical. So I'm not sure that would need a variance.
Okay.
If you look at it from that viewpoint.
So we really have 2 things on the table here, and one is the approval of the final design as presented. And the other part of that would be then the demolition of the 2 buildings on those 2 lots. I think we probably should treat those separately. And I think Mr. Coleman made a good point on the demolition. So if anyone would like to take a run at a motion, you can start there.
I can do that. I would,
Yeah, I guess the other thing I
What-
would say logistically is if you treat them together, it says demolition of existing structures and construction of a hotel. So the "and" I think necessarily involve both as opposed to one or the other. So you wouldn't be able to demolish the buildings without building them.
You don't think we'll get into an argument on the meaning of "and"?
That one's pretty cool.
Okay.
Well, let me ask this though, just, demolition and construction, since demolition comes before the and then the construction, I'm just concerned that, it still kind of opens the door that we've approved, we've approved the demolition without explicitly, guarantee, there are no guarantees, but, absolutely making sure that, the hotel, because, if we don't explicitly state that they have to have the other approvals and we grant this approval, can they next week take these down in anticipation of getting those approvals? And then, for all of their good efforts and good intentions, they don't get those approvals and now we don't have those buildings. I mean, to me, that seems like that's a risk.
I don't.
Yeah, I don't see a downside to splitting them, just for clarity, so.
I just think we should amend the demolition one then to include the relevant.
His language.
Contingent upon all other necessary approvals having been obtained.
City approval. Too. So, Mr. Nicely, do you want to?
I'd be happy to. All right, so I would move that we approve certificate 2018-2382 for the demolition of existing structures and construction of a hotel at 7 and 27 Spring Street, with the inclusion of all 6 staff recommendations as presented, and the inclusion of a 7th recommendation that explicitly would state that demolition of the structures at 7 and 27 Spring Street are contingent upon final approval of all city permits by council and related.
Maybe just leave that part out and say all permits, period.
Okay, we could just do that. Say by all permits, period.
So we're back to one motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's fine. So we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the vote?
Ms. Herring,
Yes.
Mr. Nicely,
Yes.
Ms. Riviera,
Yes.
Ms. Van Gundy,
Yes.
Councilman Rohr,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Coleman,
Yes.
Chairman Hatton.
Yes. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll be seeing more.
True.
Well, we can't do it on our own anyway. So, yeah.
Don't get permission for the demo.
That's true. That would be.
All right, moving on. Number 4B, under regular business, 2018-2452, a request by First Citizens National Bank for an informal review for the proposed building renovation of 50 South Sandusky Street, which is Zone B2, Central Business District, and located in the downtown core of the Downtown Historic District overlay. Staff, do you have a report?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
As you have indicated, the site is located at 1950 South Sandusky Street, which is on the northwest corner of Sandusky and Spring Street. The zoning is B2, Central Business District. And the site is located in the downtown core of our historic district. And here is an aerial photograph. And some historical references. The current building is not the original building to that site. In the late 1800s, there was actually a series of wood frame structures on that corner. And those were demolished, and a 3-story brick mercantile building was constructed on that site. And these are the photographs from 1900 through the Great Flood of 1913. And in the upper left photograph, yes, I was trying to point out in the 1919 photograph, which illustrates the World War I veterans and nursing staff's parade, that mercantile building is seen in the background. But by the 1923, as illustrated in the Sanborn map, which is directly underneath that photograph, there is a bus depot on that site. So sometime between 1919 and 1923, that 3-story brick mercantile building was demolished. We also have in a 1937 photograph, which indicates that there was a service station situated on that corner. And you can barely see the canopy with gas tanks or gas pumps located on that corner on the Sandusky Street side. And then in the early 1950s, the property was used for a city taxi cab service, and also a restaurant lunch counter called French's was located in that building. And in the bottom photograph, the gentleman located second from the end here was Mr. French. And then eventually, this building also housed the Greyhound bus service as well. And then the building locally became known as the Greyhound bus station. And then from the 1970s through 2015, that small building went through a series of various retail uses. And finally, in 2015, the last use of that building was by the Verizon store, and it was used for their parking and for storage. That's that one there. And so for the last 3 years, the building has been vacant. And in late 2017, the building owner put a new roof on the building. And now the building owner is Mata International, and they have been seeking a long-term stable tenant for this particular site. And the First Citizens National Bank wishes to redevelop that building to make its debut within the city of Delaware. And illustrated here are examples of bank branches that are located in Upper Sandusky and also in Powell. And so the applicants wish to bring that particular design to this building. And remembering it started, as a simple 1920s, real simple commercial one-story building. And they wish to renovate it, similar to their signature bank branch styles. And so the applicants are here, and I'd like to turn over the floor if there are any other questions or comments.
Is there any questions for city staff and commission members? Again, name and address for the record.
Okay. I'm Jerry Murray. I'm president of RCM Architects, 322 Findlay, Ohio, 322 Main Street, Findlay, Ohio, 45840. And my colleagues deserted me and sat behind me, but anyway. If you don't mind, I wanted to point out, unfortunately, the examples for branch banks for citizens, they have some better examples than those, and that's what we passed out a few minutes ago. We have just finished up last year a branch in Marion, Ohio, which is very reminiscent of the memorial that's in Marion. So a high-quality project, both inside and out, with historical overtures, which hopefully that is attractive. And then secondly, we gave you the example of a renovation that we did in Cary, Ohio, which is really very similar to this one, in that it had a simple hip roof. It was on an urban site next to a two-story building, and we again put a gable on the front, put a new door to that, gave it a brick facade and a stone base. And so there's maybe a better example of their latest motif in terms of historical looking branch banks. So I hope that gives you some idea what that would look like. You had some good examples of the existing building, as you're well aware. It's a not very good repair, but it is in a prime location in Delaware. It was a bit of a challenge, honestly, as a designer, because it's got a bit of wood, a bit of concrete block painted, it's got brick painted. It's had several modifications, a lot of openings have been bricked over, closed up, re-bricked over, etc. We felt like maybe the best opportunity for us was to reclad it in brick again, to take away the wood siding that's on the side of the building, redo that roof. Obviously, we'd like to have a drive-through window on the rear. And with that, we'll have to be touching the existing shingle roof. So we thought we would pick up the diamond pattern that used to be on one of the images. If you look closely at some of the shots, you can see a little bit of a diamond pattern in the French's shots, I believe. At least pick that up. We would like to do the gables on the end for signage, but also because I need to do a vestibule in the front. The square footage of the building is quite tight, and it's difficult to get a good vestibule and do the things I need to do inside. So I need to do a little bump out with that. On the site plan, we have been working with the city. We had an informal review with them as well. We will require some variances. It's a tight site. We are able to get our 10 cars of parking, stacking. Our parking count is not going to meet what is required for that partial because of the size of the site. So we'll have to ask, find some off-street parking for the employees, of course. We're doing some anticipation of streetscaping happening on that corner of Spring and Sandusky, assuming there's a bump out. We have talked to your fire chief about making that bump out happen and giving him access for his fire trucks to go in and do the things he needs to do, and trying to force the right turn so you don't try to turn left on the Spring as you see on the site. We are proposing a walk-up ATM if that would be approved by the city. Again, with the hotel across the street, we thought there would be some clientele for that. who might be staying in town and need to go downtown to eat and not have an ATM convenient for them. So we did that as well. We're probably going to be, we need to do a survey to find out exact dimensions, but we're going to be very tight to the rear of the parking on Sandusky. So we are asking the city if we can cooperate with them in your streetscaping, do some planters, other things to help screen the rears of our cars as they come out of that parking lot. So we're very eager to see how that goes and if we can assist in that regard as well. So overall, and there's you see an access to a neighbor's doorway. We have one there. I'm not sure if the lady to the west has some exits too and easements, but obviously she can certainly exit her door and go walk into the drive-through lanes as she has to get out of her building. So felt it worked fairly well, though it is small. We are in the process of trying to confirm some flood elevations, seeing how that affects us. If it's severe there, we may not be able to do what we'd like to do because we'll have to raise the building or do something other than this. So we're waiting to get that survey and some other things depending on your reaction today to what we propose and see if it looks like a possible project.
Questions from commission members? Discussion?
Well, just overall first impression is, and, admittedly, it's not an attractive building at this point. Over the last few years, it's had a couple of very unfortunate paint jobs, I think, over the original brick, and it's not been well cared for. But that said, my concern is right now it kind of fades into the background, and even though it's not extremely attractive or not attractive at all, it doesn't really like pop out. It's hardly noticeable when you're driving down Sandusky. My concern is that first of all, I appreciate the fact that you are striving to save the building and keep that building functional. My concern is that the design, the impression I get of the design is something that looks more comfortable, kind of in suburbia or outside of the core historic district. And I think, it would be interesting to see if there could be design, or a renovation that would accommodate, the needs of the tenant, but, still not make it look like it, kind of belongs, 3 blocks south on Sandusky Street, between the McDonald's and the Wendy's. So that's my overall impression, I guess, initially.
Okay.
To add on to that, one of the things that I would want to look at, I think, to retain that historical character of the existing building is the existing openings, even if some of them have been bricked in. If you remove those infills, what openings are you left with? And what does that then allow you to do with the design of the building that then reads back to what it was historically? I saw that there was one big opening. It looked like there was maybe a garage door when it was an auto shop. If that was infilled with something, is that your entry? So that there's a little bit more variety, vibrancy going on with the building.
I'm not exactly sure where the potential garage door was.
It's on the north side. Oh, I'm sorry. It's the east side of the building, but on the north there are two. It's where the wood panels, plywood infills are. If you look at the wall itself, there's
right. If you go back to
a soldier course.
They must have a subtenant there at one time or whatever. Right. It's not a garage door. It's actually like a separate shop.
It looks like a larger opening, and I believe it was the Greyhound station. So I think there was also taxi. There was an opening. It looks like a garage door opening when it was an auto shop. Then when it became a restaurant, and Elaine, if I'm wrong, or Diane, if I'm wrong, let me know. When it became the restaurant and the Greyhound station, it looks like that's when it was infilled. And then there's a door and maybe a ticket window, potentially when it was the Greyhound station.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Right here.
The blue windows?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Can you imagine? Oh, the next slide.
Yeah.
So
The blue windows?
I think it looks like that door and
Right.
that were there when it was a Greyhound station.
Possible.
And then
Yeah.
outside of that, there's a soldier course above that defines a larger opening.
Yeah.
Anyway, besides the point, there are openings in that structure already that seem to be design opportunities.
Appreciate that. I can look at that. Again, with the limited floor plan I have, it's challenging with the program they want to do in the building. But I could certainly look and see if the entrance to the edge would serve them as well as where I have it. I do have that. It leaves me in a problem. I have two doors on a very small property. And which one will you allow me to close? And
Well, yeah.
that's
I
why
guess what
I was
I'm
looking at
saying
which
is-
one I could do.
Is that the design that was given to us doesn't reference any of the existing opens except the one.
Right. Because I have CMU in the rear, I have wood on the side, I thought if I would re-veneer it with a new brick and not paint the brick, it would be more in keeping with the downtown aesthetic and be a new facade on that. It'd be the same form of the building, but obviously new materials.
Right, right.
Yeah,
But retaining, well,
Good or bad?
you could retain those openings with new materials. I don't know what condition the brick is in. I don't know whether or not it can take another coat of paint. This building is so different, it can't be compared to
No.
the rest of the core,
I'm-
but it should still be
But it's in
historical.
the core.
Right,
Right.
so it should still be treated as historical.
It's a full masonry wall with no insulation
Okay.
currently. So like veneering it, I actually help my energy code a bit too. So I have some positives with that.
Mr. Nestle?
Thank you. First of all, again, like others have said, I appreciate the fact that that this is in development and that we're trying to do something meaningful and somewhat permanent on this corner. As far as things to reflect on for me, my role on this commission, essentially, I'm a cultural geographer in urban history and geography. And when I think about this lot, I think the 1940s, when the Greyhound bus station, that was the last truly historic, significant historical use of this particular space within the downtown. And so for me, I think the starting point needs to be that, or times before that, before it went through this whole series of different uses in the intervening 50 plus years. That's really the one that really defines this space. And so when I look at that image in particular from the 1940s or so, 1950s, certain things really emerge from that photo that I think in the current design proposal it gets a little lost. It's a little too modern in terms of the glazing and the facade. Essentially, basically using the structure but recoding everything with different kinds of windows, different styles. That's where I think, for me, it kind of loses some of its momentum. So I think when you look at that Greyhound photo, where you can just kind of see it off in the corner, things like a transomed door, so you have the window over there. I like the idea of the diamond pattern. You know, that definitely evokes that history, but different things like that. I think the configuration of the windows, the recognition of the previous openings, making it feel like more of that historic building would really allow it to fit into the downtown much more clearly than I think it would right now. I think it really would tend to stand out as, oh, there's an old building that's been totally rehabbed and looks really, really modern. And sort of like Commissioner
I'm
Coleman
not
was
sure
saying.
you would recognize it as an old building.
Right.
Right.
And that's my biggest concern. I would like to see much more of an embrace of that historical era.
Mr. Coleman, appreciate that comment.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of echo a couple comments that were made about trying to, retain, understand the challenges of, that being a non-insulated masonry wall. But again, I think to the extent that the brick, when I've walked by, it seems like it's still in pretty good shape. I think it really is important to retain the historic fabric. I understand that, there are challenges and that, certain, necessities for the drive-through, et cetera, are going to somewhat change, the overall structure, but I think you really need to work on trying to retain that historic fabric as much as possible.
Okay, appreciate that. Are we in agreement, are you in agreement that the wood-sided part of the building is not worth keeping or not worth keeping in its present form? Are we also, the rear of the building that's just exposed concrete block, are we also agreement that that's not the most attractive facade to keep?
Yes.
Okay. So I can work on those as well. Could I offer an alternative based upon some of your comments to get your feedback on that too? Because obviously when we come back again, I want to make sure I'm on the same page with all of you.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind.
Sure.
Another option that I just brought that takes the gable away and just kind of does corners and or hips, excuse me, and kind of quiets the facade down a little bit, let things get a little bit less suburban. If that works for you guys. If so, we'll pursue this one instead.
Thank you.
So basically, someone anticipating maybe that the gables would maybe cause a little heartburn because they could look suburban. If the hip over the door and a few maybe making the graphics a little less bold would suit you and make it attractive for your needs. What are your thoughts that way?
I guess I'm gonna, kind of echo back to what Commissioner Herring mentioned about, again, trying to work with the existing openings. Again, I understand it's a challenge, but I like this better than the other design by far. But again, it's a brand new building for all intents and purposes. It's not the same building. I mean, it's got, to use a phrase, I guess, in the previous application, it's kind of a nod back to the old building, and I guess it still has the same bones underneath. But again, I think, as Commissioner Herring mentioned, you would look at that and you would say that's a new building. It doesn't really retain the historic fabric or the historic, feel.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
I think one of another detail that kind of throws me off is the stone base.
Okay.
That this building wouldn't have a stone base. It would be brick veneer. Now, if there was some kind of brick detail that defined kind of a separation point under the windows, that would make sense. But I feel like the base in this case also gives it that suburban feel.
Honestly, I was trying to interpret your downtown standards.
I know, and
mix things up, but
they're hard with this building because
it's such an odd building,
yeah.
and in terms of its scale, it's not a three-story building. I know I have a base in the middle and the top. Yeah. I was trying to give you a base in the middle and the top, but maybe I tried too hard. So I should ask that question. Should I even worry about doing a freeze board? I can't see a freeze board in any of the images from historical.
I think the simpler it is, makes the most sense for this building.
Are you okay with leaving the bricks painted?
If it's according to our guidelines, if it's already been painted.
It's already painted, it's okay, but.
But, yeah.
So a couple of thoughts, listened to everyone else and pretty much in agreement. I think for me, the thing that really throws this off and really disguises what's underneath a few things, but certainly the completely different roof line. And particularly when I look at the south elevation with the drive-through, and that is a very, even though it's the back of that building, it's a very public, as you're coming, that's, the main entrance into down Sandusky into town is right there. And that's, you're seeing this huge addition sort of, canopy on the back. And I think I understand, why you have that for weather protection. But I think if there's maybe something that could be done more with, for instance, what the hotel did, where it's not trying to be part of the building. It's just what it is, right? And so I don't like the fact that the roof line, I like the second one better, but if we could keep the original roof, just that hip roof, I think that's huge. The other really two things that I think the windows are, really out of scale, out of touch kind of, and then I'm never going to get comfortable with the entryway. We would not allow this on any other building. It's way too modern. If you think through the storefronts that everyone else has, they certainly don't have two doors. I fully understand the business, but again, what for right or wrong, your business needs to make accommodations to fit in, not the other way around.
Okay.
And I know that's difficult, and it could very well be that this isn't the right place for a branch bank. From a non-design standpoint, I got a lot of issues with doing things, curb cuts when we're trying to create less of an auto-oriented downtown, curb cut to somebody who walks a lot and gets right hooked all the time. We generally would try and minimize or eliminate any curb cuts, particularly again on Sandusky, which is our main thoroughfare. So there's a lot of other things, but since we just focus on design, and we can certainly talk with planning and council on these other things, for me, it's the roof line, it's the entry. I agree with your thoughts on the materials. I'd much rather just have the original brick that's out there, painted or not, rather than try and create something that it's not. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. It throws me.
I agree with your point on the doors, the really small, low occupancy in this space. So it should only need one door.
Yeah. I appreciate that, and I may try to get the corner one and see if that works for us or not. I'm not sure. Point of reference, the window on the left is the actual opening.
Right. Yeah, I understand
it's kind
that.
it's kind of odd. I was trying to get a balance, which is never was balanced, but so be it.
So
We don't need symmetry in this building.
That's good. It doesn't have it.
I was just gonna say, I like the observation on the canopy too, at least, making it more of a, it's a utilitarian functional canopy, and maybe utilitarian's not the right word, but, it's not part of the building. It's, it serves a function, and it's, an attractive canopy that,
Right.
is clearly, basically standalone.
My challenges with that, I'll have to give it some depth because of the tube system. So, but we'll work it out.
And so one thing too, just to, for me, I think, particularly as the commission has said, various people, it is that entryway there in front of the vestibule rather, with that wide array of windows. I think that's the most jarring thing that I see. That's the one I would definitely suggest that be really toned back to really fit within the more historic look. But also a lot of the small details of lighting and historic looking sills under the windows. Things like that would call back, in particular, the one I was referring to, this one picture with the Benton's department store with the Greyhound bus station next to it. I think that one, for example, I'm not saying it has to look like that, but that's, I think, a good idea of what I would see as the historic moment for it. So it really could still call back to a lot of those historical features that are sort of missing. And I definitely like Concept 2 better, but it needs that history there, I think, that just kind of gets lost in the windows and the metal, and just the very modern lighting and the base and so forth. So those are my thoughts on it.
Okay.
Other comments?
I would just have to say I'm in agreement with most of everyone here on the committee. I think simple is the focus on this building. I think the door being where the old garage door, I think would be well positioned right there. Since there is no symmetric reason with this building, I think that would be a good approach, and then just adding to it. So I'm in full agreement with that. I think simple is better small town kind of feel.
And I do suspect, being that this is intended to be a bank, I know that there are certain interests there in keeping lots of visibility and glass and so on. So I know that's going to be a challenge, obviously, to figure out how to maintain that safety. But notwithstanding that, I think, just comments that I've made anyway, I think those stand.
Okay. Can I, just a clarification, I like the idea of the entry on the corner because there is an opening there we could do some things with, and we use the historical standard glazing and mullion system, that'll look nice. But the old door that's there, what have you seen people do with former doors? Do I put a window in it, or can I brick that up?
We've seen windows and then brick.
I can put a brick wainscot and finish it with a window. That'd be okay?
I think.
I would prefer that than, putting in, the current rendering of the entrance.
The standards do call it, if you brick in an opening, that you leave a ghost opening.
Okay.
To show that it was there, that you're not
Recess
just
it or do something to make it work.
piecing it in, yeah.
And the other openings in the CMU in the rear that have been blocked up as well, if I'm painting the building, I just paint over those two, that they just become ghosts of former openings. You okay with that?
So generally, we don't focus a lot on the rear if it's not visible from the street. Unfortunately, since you're on the corner, it is, so we would have a little more probably to say on that.
Okay. She's pointing at the side right now that has some hills.
Yeah.
And you'll see it as you drive by, of course, on the drive through, but you'd have to look for it from the street.
Yeah, I guess my opinion would be if you're not changing it, but you're just putting paint on it, you're making it look better, assuming it's not, some garish color. I mean,
Okay. Okay, that sounds clear. Very good.
Anything else from anyone?
That's a nice roof.
Questions for you guys?
Might be the only part of the building.
A lot happening in this block of town.
It's kind of the last block that hasn't been done,
It is,
so.
it is. Thank you for your honesty.
Hey, thank you very much. We do very much appreciate the opportunity to do informal reviews. It gives us a chance to maybe talk outside the standards a little bit, hopefully help you, give you some guidance so you're not going down a rabbit hole that you don't want to go. City staff is always available. They can reach me. So please, up until you are in front of us again, please utilize their services as well.
Thank you so much.
I guess also put the informal in context. The just approved a very major project downtown and one formal reading. They actually came to us in two informal readings, meetings, and also worked with staff quite a lot. So, it's
It's a
time
process.
well spent, and we do appreciate it, and that helps get it going so that, when you do bring the formal review, it's,
We've seen it before.
we're all on the same wavelength.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Number 5 on the agenda, staff comments.
Yes.
Do we have staff comments?
Yes, we do.
All right.
I have two, actually. And I need to still get our last item together for.
Mhm. Okay.
The printer was not cooperating.
Okay.
So is this for you guys?
I will do this.
So let me check the printer.
So we're not done, so don't pack up yet. Yeah. Sorry.
It went the last 5 minutes?
Considering all the ground you've covered.
What's the last item?
But we have some more ground that we're going to cover. And staff comments, new business around the 14 list, I guess, isn't that their address now? So 12.
Yes, 14 West Boulevard. Thank you for this.
We wondered. You just didn't have anywhere to go.
we still have a few more items to work through. First, staff comment. To help start the conversation on temporary sidewalk vestibule design guidelines. David Heflin has put together this memo. It has some base items.
Yeah.
And this is a starting point to get your ideas flowing.
So I know you've all been thinking about temporary sidewalk vestibules.
I've been trying to block it out of my mind.
Trying to come up with some parameters. And, as we had talked about before, staff is generally supportive, of the vestibule concept. But being that the one case had been appealed and was presented before City Council, they definitely had given some direction to it. And so City Council, in the second paragraph, City Council provided some direction with the recent case on the subject. They indicated concerns with allowing them along Sandusky Street in particular, as well as concerns to ensure size, color, and style consistency. And to these ends, we've come up with 10 general parameters that if you could, as I said, start thinking about. And there was a whole pack of handouts too. I didn't get the copies of.
Diane, just number one, interior space limitations, does that refer to the actual interior of the business, the building itself, or is that the vestibule? I assume it's the building, but.
Correct. The building itself, the exterior placement limits, we're suggesting that the vestibule be placed within an approved patio. And so that of course would help dictate what those exterior limitations would be. And then two, taking into account ADA requirements where we need to have a certain width on the doorway and the turnarounds and so forth. And material and design details. Other communities where we have done research in the past, we had looked into the city of Columbus in their different historic districts. They only allow vestibules on private property, not in the public right of way. And then the vestibules fall underneath their awning guidelines as opposed to the materials and the type of framing.
So one of the reasons they do that, because when I spoke in front of the, whatever in the world it was, in the fall, we talked about that a little bit. One of the reasons they do that is essentially eliminates vestibules. Now there are some, I think like in German Village, like what used to happen down there for a while, Jimmy's too. If you got a setback, you can do it. But Mohawk, every place else is right on the sidewalk. So it essentially eliminates, for the most part, any vestibule that would be visible from the sidewalk or the street, right? So it's a nice way of saying no.
Well, let me ask this then. Is that something similar to Columbus? Is that a provision that council might be amenable to?
Well, we already have one. So we've already got one.
Well, I know.
I got to read on council, although if we do number 9 and say only off Sandusky Street, I think that eliminates 99% of our work on the street.
Probably.
The Sandusky Street is really the one that people are going to work on.
Yeah, and that's the one that's gonna, I think,
Be
maybe the most
12 West,
problematic.
12 West was in the sub-district. It was just
Yeah.
kind of a one-off.
Yeah.
I agree.
I didn't like the idea of a mall, especially in the right of way, than the city property.
Yeah.
But we have all these patios, so
Right.
it's sort of
Which are
Sort of like,
temporary.
we're allowing patios that they're permanent,
Yeah.
let's be honest.
Right.
They have fences around them. So they're using public property, so it's kind of hard to say, well, you can use it for your patio, but you can't use it for.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of my thoughts, Diane, around too, and I know we don't want to spend all night getting into this because we have other things to cover, but I would like to see the maximum size be as small as possible to meet ADA requirements and no bigger, because, you know, we're all human. If it's big, I want bigger. And next thing you know, we've got people who want to build waiting rooms, you know, and so my concern, and I also agree, and I've brought this up several times, that these not only should be off Sandusky, but they should only be for the smaller, the 12 West, that can't build a vestibule interior. I think of
Right.
1808, that's big enough. They have an interior vestibule. Now, they never shut the second door, so cold air blows in anyway. Buns has that. Because if I'm the owner of one of those businesses, I think, why don't I use the city property and I put another couple tables in there? And that's not what we want to have happen, is people rehab the space or a new business goes in. I think of Brooklyn, for instance, the one that's going in there. Why not? Why do I want to give up space that costs how much per square foot? You're a realtor, you know, versus free space on the city sidewalk.
Flying pig is a perfect example.
Exactly. They built the whole thing and didn't do it. So I definitely think it has to have a minimum, fairly small square footage requirement before you can have one of these. That's my thought. So Diane, the takeaway is you really like us to go home, give this some
Give
thought,
some thought.
maybe put
yeah.
it as a discussion point on our next meeting
For-
agenda.
Right, for October.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will not be here. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, versus square footage, what about just occupancy?
So the issue around anything other than square footage is occupancy can vary greatly. It can also be, well, we use half of it for a party room in the back, or, you know, our kitchen, because 14 West is small no matter probably how you configured that. But certainly, yeah, I'm not trying to pick on the folks that are going into Brooklyn, but that's kind of an odd space where it's a big building, but their occupancy may not be all, their table, whatever you want to call it, that diner count, probably may not be all that high just because it's a weird configuration.
If they have a high occupancy, they have to have high square footage, so should have the room for a vestibule inside.
Exactly, yeah. So, okay. All right, Joe, I'm sorry.
Oh, shoot, now I lost my train of thought. That's okay, it was probably.
Save it for next month.
Oh,
Okay.
you know what, I'm sorry.
So you won't be here.
I won't be here in October, so I guess any suggestions, comments I have, Diane, can I just forward to staff?
To Dave Ethlin. Yep,
Okay, great.
yep. He'll be collecting any questions or comments that
And that-
you might have.
That's for anybody too. We don't have to say this. So go ahead and send Dave an email with thoughts, or if you have comments, clarifications, what other cities are doing that kind of
Right,
thing.
and then we'll summarize everything, and then, you know, just have like a think session
Okay.
that, you know, in October or November or whenever we meet. Okay. The second staff comment concerning the fiberglass clad the fiberglass clad windows. We are trying to arrange for the window manufacturer representative to come to the meeting in October. And then just, you know, bring samples, and then you can ask any questions.
Okay. October, you say?
Yes.
You can't miss it now, Joe. It's the fiberglass clad window
Oh,
guy.
man.
You can watch the YouTube and call questions.
I'll do it for my hotel room in Louisville.
There you go.
All good.
Okay. All right. And that was the two staff comments that we had.
All right, thank you. So on 6, you were just handed a couple of things. And I wanted to bring this up. This is around the new restaurant 14 West. Mr. DeStefano was in front of us over a year ago, I think, or right around a year ago. We had some back and forth. We approved that design. Again, that was a new build with infill. There were a lot of variances from the standards, again, which we have the ability to do that with new buildings. We don't require that they replicate exactly what's around it. As time went on, and again, there was a long time, there were a lot of changes made without staff being notified. The memorandum that you have here, and then the other one, Dave had sent me an email, maybe, what is today, Wednesday, maybe Monday. We talked through this. He had asked if I would be willing to do administrative approval on this. My concern was that there was a lot of changes that the entire commission discussed, thought through, gave due diligence to, voted on, and a lot of those things have changed. And I wasn't entirely comfortable doing that without coming back in front of the commission and letting the commission comment on that. Now, normally we would basically stop progress on that job, tell them they had to come back in front of the HPC. Obviously, there's a time around that. They were not able to be on the formal agenda because they were not, 10 days or whatever before that they have to meet, 2 weeks, give or take. So this just boiled up a few days ago. So my comment to Dave, and Dave was in support of that, is I wanted to bring this up. Diane and staff were good enough to put this together to talk through this, because there are changes, and I didn't want to just make administrative approval. And this is kind of something we haven't done before. So I guess really what I wanted to do here was get input from the commission to determine if I do want to give administrative approval to any and or all of these.
Is there anything in particular that is troubling you?
Not in particular. I'll be honest, I have been gone for 3 days on business travel, so I have not had a lot of time to study these. I've looked through Dave's email, but there were a lot of changes, right? So Dave certainly has concerns, and some of that is maybe beyond HPC. You can see there are there's a patio, there's a drink rail, there's a sign pole that's half on public property. There's a lot of things going on here. There's hanging pallet gardens. There are planters that were built which are either near or on public property again. So there's a lot of moving pieces here, and that's why I really kind of wanted to go through that. So I don't know, Diane, do you have, I don't know, you have a staff report, but do you have?
Well, Ryan Rydell is here. He is the managing.
I'm a managing partner, operations manager for both properties.
For 12 West and also 14 West William Street, which is called Smoked Ohio Barbecue and Bar. And back in on August 16th, 2017, I'm looking at the first paragraph, or second rather, on the memo. On August 16th, 2017, the Historic Preservation Commission granted approval of design amendments, subject to administrative approval of conditioned elements. And as each of, in our usual world, as each of these components were planned and performed, each one would have come, have been presented to staff, and we would have sought administrative approval for each individual item as it occurred. And that, excuse me, and that was the intent. Not necessarily that, each item would need to be presented back before HPC because it's always dependent upon the complexity. And what had happened, that there was a transition of managers, and unfortunately, a lot of that information was not relayed to Ryan. However, the building owner, has been through this process before. And so taken individually, the majority of these items are administrative approvable. They do meet the standards. Okay, so we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We can take each individual item and take a look at those. And so what you were handed is a packet that I typically prepare for the HPC chairman for administrative approval. And it's composed of the HPC application, a site map, photographs and specifications of the proposed improvements. And, and as I said, just because of this particular circumstance, there was a lot as time went on. And so if we want to start, from the beginning, with speakers and replacement gooseneck lights on the front elevation. And so if you want to, in the packet, the additional packet that Elaine just handed you, you want to go 4 pages back. And so you'll go past the HPC application, go past the map, and you'll see a photograph showing the placement of the speakers and the replacement light fixtures.
Do you perhaps have another copy of that packet, by chance?
I do.
Oh, that's great.
Let me grab it.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to rush.
No, it's all good.
Speakers are the same, they're just painted, is that?
Yes. Ryan's familiar with this. The speakers had been installed, and that they were, we noticed that they were out of proportion. They were, looking a little too large compared to the gooseneck light fixtures that were already approved and already installed. So Ryan and I talked, and the options would be install smaller speakers to get back into proportion, or you could install larger light fixtures. But those light fixtures had been installed without us reviewing those replacement light fixtures. And so these are also black gooseneck light fixtures, and the speakers were painted gray to blend into the background.
What was the lighting we approved? It was over a year ago, so can you help us?
The lighting that was approved is in the top photograph. It was a small.
So still goosenecks, just small?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And those alone, would have been fine.
Right.
Except when the speakers got installed, then they looked out of proportion.
So we approved it's probably a 6 or an 8 inch shade, and now it looks like it's a 14, 16, maybe bigger. Do we know what the dimensions of those are?
I believe it's a 13.
I mean, I see the shade. If it's 17 inches, if this spec sheet is the actual design and not just for
Actually, yes.
the style. So
Right,
that's the actual size.
Right, the width is 17 and the
And-
height is 9.
Do we know the size that we approved? Gotta be half the size.
I believe they were 9-inch
Okay, so, yeah.
originally.
So again, trying to make an affordable option that still looked well and complied with the standards. The final result, in discussion with Dave and myself, we thought that this was an approvable item.
Well, since we're kind of tackling this one at a time, and since I realize you weren't here originally, why did we go from the approved 9-inch shade to the 17-inch shades?
Well, first of all, thank you, everyone, for having me late in the evening here.
Do you need his, okay.
Absolutely. Ryan Rydell, with now 1214 West property, because that's kind of how we're labeling our address, is a 12-14. That's what we've been told to do for permitting reasons and so forth. But the property in discussion is 14 West William Street. And I did come on the scene with Mr. DeStefano in the middle of April. And at that point in time, there was some separation between the general contractor that he was using at that time. We started looking for a new general contractor for the process of finishing the build of this building that he's been working on for quite a long time. So, and I know you all have been discussing it for a long time as well as other things with the other property that he owns. But I want to thank you all for having me, and I know Dave wants to be here too. Unfortunately, he's out of town on a client meeting, and he couldn't make it, so I'm going to step in on his behalf. And then why these changes were made without approval is the initial question.
Well, actually, the question, just so we don't get
Okay.
wide ranging, let's focus on one at a time. So the lights, because that's pretty easy. We had, 9 and they went to 17.
Absolutely.
So is there a reason?
So I had the opportunity to speak with Diane on the 27th, perhaps, of July.
In June.
June?
We had met in June.
The 27th of June, I believe it was, and we went over the property. She had actually taken this initial top photo with the speakers and the gooseneck lamps, and I don't know if we caught each other outside or we made phone calls and contacted one another, but we met at the property and we discussed what was going on with the property and things that I should know about what were going on with the property and where the building process was, and quite a few long list of laundry items that we needed to discuss. And I got a good feeling of what she wanted and what was not only what she wanted from the speakers and the lights at that point in time, but what was already approved. However, when we discussed the fixing of the, I guess, the speakers being a little bit.
So I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
But if we can.
Condense.
One thing at a time, no, not condense, but let's just, so we don't do this all night.
Absolutely.
We can talk, why did the light shades go from 9 inches to 17 inches? That's,
So
right now, let's just focus
and
on
that has to do with the speakers.
Okay.
That is why this picture was sent to me.
Okay.
Is because these speakers were here and they were not approved.
So the speakers are huge, so we thought huge lamps would make the speakers look less huge.
We had discussion, verbal discussion that was either you're going to need to change the size of the speakers or you're going to need to change the size of the lamps. I like this. I like the actual suggestion of changing the size of the lamps because to be honest with you, I think the 9-inch lamps don't fit the scale of the building. They're too small, to be completely frank with you. That was, in my opinion, poor design choice, but I'm not a designer. So, so I went and I sourced out some lamps and I changed the lamps.
Okay.
I did it without approval.
Okay.
And that's just my noviceness to the situation and HPC's approval process.
Okay, that helps. So Diane, was that conversation, or was that based on a conversation that you had? I'm just trying to be clear, where you said, hey, maybe you could make the lamps bigger and the speakers would not stand out so much.
Yes,
The shades, I should say.
I was notified by another staff person that, the speakers had gone up. And I went over to talk to Ryan, after I had conversation with Dave Eflin. And Dave Eflin and I had discussed the two options. Either make the speaker smaller or install larger gooseneck lighting.
Okay, so you and David made that decision administratively then?
Correct.
Okay, so I think that's important because you've given him guidance
Mm-hmm.
and it sounded kind of like they just did that. So I just want to be perfectly clear.
Right, and right, so those were the two options.
Okay,
And technically Ryan should have come back to us and said, hey, we decided to install the larger gooseneck lighting, and here is the design.
okay.
Can we have administrative approval for the new lamps? But
I can
the lamps
understand the
were
confusion
installed.
because it kind of maybe sounded like you said to do it.
Yeah, no,
So
there was
I'll
two.
give you credit on that, and I also like your design thought. I think your ones look better.
I will say, she didn't just say, go ahead and do it.
Okay.
She didn't say that. I can be honest about that. She didn't say, just go ahead and do it. I don't know if the discussion got as deep as, hey, we're going to need to get approval on that. We talked about a lot of things that day. So I was getting real in the loop with everything that I needed to know. And Diane was graceful enough to allow me to find out some of those things. So I'm appreciative of it.
Okay.
I just made it without,
Was it an either or, either get smaller speakers?
it was kind of an either or. Either it's going to
It
need,
wasn't,
Can I throw another
Exactly.
number out there, or another option?
Absolutely.
Before we do that,
All right.
just to keep things in place, anybody uncomfortable with the larger shades?
I'm not. I think they look good.
I will say, I'm kind of, I think with the speakers perched on top of them, it still looks.
The speakers look terrible. That's fine.
Yeah.
So, but what I'm
They
asking,
look better painted.
Yeah.
I'm okay with.
put your thumbs over.
Yes.
Are we okay with the lights? I want to
I'm
kind of
okay
take
with
these
the
one at a
lights.
time.
I'm
Okay,
with the lights.
great, thank you. Now, carry on with your speaker
Okay.
conversation.
Yes.
Yes, we
The
got that.
speakers, I think, they definitely fade more into the background, painted, but they're still pretty, they're just really out there, perched on top of the gooseneck. It looks like, a cinder block, balancing on the gooseneck. Perhaps if they could just be moved up and away from the lights a little bit, it would take some of that busyness out of there, and they wouldn't. I think they would actually look better, and they look pretty awful, I think, to me, even with the padding.
Well, I think they have so many technology with Bluetooth speakers, they can be very well hidden. It's just
It's
a
in the-
major eyesore. If you can look at. this
Yeah,
picture. Yeah.
and again, when you look at the larger context of the building, I
Do we
think,
have it?
Yeah.
yes, it's further down in the packet.
Second to last.
4 more pages back.
And again, we're looking at, the overall project cost, the cost of the existing speakers, the cost of replacing them if, it was so desired.
Yeah.
That's what when Dave Eflin and I talked on staff's viewpoint, the final product, although done in a backward process, the final product, still looks, fine.
So I share, I think, the concerns with the speakers. This that you had us look at, is that the drink pole in question, or is that just a
Yes.
weird thing that happened on the copier? Okay, so
No, you're right, that's further down on the
That managed-
list.
I'm right, which one?
The
That is the
pole.
pole,
This is the
okay.
one with the light.
Unfortunately, the way the angle that you took the picture covers up the one speaker. So,
Oh.
so yeah, it looks 50% better. This is an unusual building. It's a new build. It's set back. However, it's still the storefront. And I always think even in the transitional district, we would not let somebody put these on the front of their building. I think of like Stas's, for instance. Now, Pat has outside speakers, but they're hidden up under the awning. I'm sure he can get a permit. I don't know. But this doesn't have an awning. You know, you can hide these. Or certainly you could have inset them. You can get, you know, inset speakers and painted the grill and you wouldn't even see them. So I agree that they don't look good. In the scope of things, I get it. It's money, but in the scope of things, it's pennies, right? And I would like to see an alternative. I look at the building and it looks like they've built, I don't know if you'd call those plinth blocks or whatever, that you kind of put a base when you break the siding for a lamp or something. So they've built that in there. So I understand that will be, if they move the speakers, you still now have the kind of blocks in there. So my thought is they certainly make a wide variety of like ribbon speakers that are virtually flat, you know, that would be out. So instead of having a bracket, kind of that outdoor patio speaker that you might put at home, these would be flat and maybe stick out this much. And, you know, it may be an 8x10 sort of thing that would mount flat on that. And I get it's a couple $100 more, but you're not changing the wiring. You're not changing those blocks. You're just kind of getting these big appendages off the storefront. So would that be something that you guys would be willing to take a look at?
Absolutely. I mean, we'll look at whatever we need to look at. I mean, again.
Because I think if the tenor of the commission, we're okay with the lights. I know we get some other things. So you want to talk about the door, because that has kind of a unique
right.
Fix.
Right, the service entry door.
So we're done talking about the speakers, I take it?
Well, so the outcome, this is going to be very different. So the outcome would be administrative approval from me as the chair. So I would like, and certainly if the commission's okay, I'm going to take their tenor. I'd like to see you investigate some alternatives for a flat speaker that would not, you know, lean out, not project out from the building. I think it would hide that much more, particularly if it were paintable like these were.
Okay.
So does anybody have would that be a compromise that doesn't require them to do rewiring and woodwork and everything else?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, all right.
Administrative.
Okay, so we'll look at some sort of a flat speaker. We're okay with the lamps. Diane, back to you on the service door.
Okay. The service entry door was supposed to be, you know, the minimum 50% glass, maximum 75% glass. That was written on the construction drawings, which showed 100% glass, that the architect had drawn it as 100% glass. It was noted, you know, when I did the zoning review of the construction drawings, I had noted that it needed to be, you know, according to the architectural standards, 50%, 75%. But the 100% glass was installed anyway. The building owner was, you know, he was agreeable to change it back, you know, replace it to the design that it should be. So in the interim, the contractor had fashioned a temporary based panel to affix to the lower half of the service entry door until the proper door could be manufactured.
Okay. Yep.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good on that part. Awesome.
Okay. So he can go ahead go ahead and install that temporary one?
Yeah, just as long as temporary doesn't become permanent.
Right,
So,
no.
It mentions, 6-week lead time on the door. Can we specify that it needs to be done within 2 months?
Yeah. What is, today is the 26th? Yeah, I mean, I don't foresee it being, I mean, the door is ordered, so.
Yeah.
It's just about, I'm on somebody else's time now. The millwork
No, I
guy,
understand.
the millwork guy is building the door, so I would love to say absolutely 100%, done 2 months. We'll get it done. And the reason we went with the millwork guy is doing a custom door for us because we don't have to rebuild the whole frame and everything. So, he's a one-man show. But I absolutely will stay on it and we'll try to get done in 2 months.
I mean, I guess to me, 2 months is, I guess, an arbitrary, I mean, just so it doesn't go like, 6
Forever.
months or a year. So if it gets done this year, I think it's reasonable.
We can put in writing that it will absolutely be done in a specified amount of time. And if it's not, then there is a process that I'm sure you go through at that time as well. Now I do have a question. We did build a panel. My contractor, who I'm using right now, and myself built a panel for this door. You do want that to go up, is that correct? Okay. I just want to make sure. I mean, I only ask because if you don't, the salvaging of the door that I have now, I can salvage, perhaps sell it, whatever. If I affix it to the door, most likely that door is done. So I'm
If that's the case.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd rather you recoup your money, yeah.
We built it because I didn't want to slow down any process. And I want to make you happy. I want to make anybody happy that I can make happy to get this process done.
If you can sell it, let's do it, yeah. It's only 2 months or so.
Little gorilla
Right.
glue?
Well, that's the thing. We'd be affixing it up to the glass with liquid nails because there's really no way to modify these doors.
That's fine. Okay, so in that case, Mr. Coleman's concerned, and remember, we're not creating anything new here. This is going to be kind of verbal guidance. Now they're writing it down, right? But this is going to be verbal guidance. And to Mr. Coleman's point, it's not particularly that at 2 months and 1 day, we're going to come chain the place up.
Well,
But in 2 months, we're really instructing Diane and her staff to go back and say, hey, look, we
You made a
2 months,
commitment.
what's going on? If you
because
say-
the entire building's certificate of occupancy
Right.
is dependent on all of these repairs being
Right.
completed. They have a temporary certificate of occupancy so they can open. This is considered zoning compliance. If
which is
these
also-
items aren't complied with, then they don't get their certificate of occupancy. They don't get to open.
Which is why we're
Anything.
doing this right now as kind of an unusual ad hoc
Right.
sort of process.
Right, so that's, Ryan and Mr. DiStefano's motivation to make sure everything is finished.
Okay, so number 3, we're going to leave the door as is, and we're going to look for a 2-month-ish time frame to get that custom door that meets standards up. Number 4, the paint was removed from, and the mortar was repaired on the wall between the 2 properties. We can make them paint it again, which would then be against our standards because it's now exposed brick. I've looked at it, it looks like that it was done well. Dan West, who, is local, I don't have a problem with it. The end result is fine. It's just, it wasn't part of the permitting process. So
Again, excuse my noviceness. I just went,
Yeah,
I wanted to make it look better. I wanted to match it to my neighbor's wall. And so I took off the fire paint that was on the wall that was really rather ugly.
Yep, no.
It does.
I should have had approval of that. And I now know that.
Sorry.
Yes, yes.
All right, so the
Totally
next ones
understands.
probably are going to require a little more discussion, and I would like Diane to maybe give us some insight. I think there are some, David sent me some pictures. Do we have pictures of the, yeah, got pictures of the boxes in the poll? Yes, we do. Okay,
Yes.
hit it. Diane.
Okay. Right, this is a multi-item. It's the private patio and public sidewalk patio items. This situation is unique in that we have a private patio, which would require HPC's approval of the design of the items being placed on it. In the very initial discussions of the project, you know, the owner and the previous manager had always said, we will not be going on to the public sidewalk because we have a private patio. Well, when talking about the fencing and so forth with the adjacent 12 West, it seemed logical to extend that fencing out, and squaring it off. But again, that needed drawings and approval, before the installation. And so there are a number of items that were placed on the public sidewalk. One of which is a beautifully made planter box that Ryan did to bring in a little green space into the patio, and it's on casters, and it is considered, a temporary item that is movable. And so, again, just looking at the design of that particular item, it's complementary to the storefront. There are other planter boxes, in the historic district.
So I don't know that the planter boxes themselves are any sort of an issue. They're on wheels, they're temporary. It would be not that much different than just putting an urn or something out there that's bigger. I think, and maybe I'm missing it, but for me, and certainly I think from talking with Dave, the concern is that they are now, first of all, they've created a patio on the public right away on the sidewalk without a patio permit. So that's certainly number one. Number two, my concern is that the original intent of the setback was to have the patio. And if they now have a sidewalk patio, what's to prevent Bag of Nails, the new restaurant that's going into Brooklyn? They have their own, but once again, if this other guy has part of the sidewalk, I want part of the sidewalk. Why wouldn't I? And so I'm very concerned that this will set a precedent. Probably out of all the things, maybe the pole on half on public property is not a good thing, but that concern, not the planners. The planners are fine, move them back onto their own property. But when you already have, and particularly when the whole ask on this with the setback, because normally we wouldn't allow a setback, the whole ask and the whole reason we granted the permit to have them set back was to have that built-in patio, right? And so then to say, well, but now we want public right away as well. That's the one thing I've got a real big problem with. And again, because of the precedent that it would set with people that already have that built-in buns, Bag of Nails, whatever, I can't remember the name of the place that's going in Brooklyn, all of those, if I own any of those properties, I want one tomorrow. Same thing that we faced with the vestibules. If you remember when Flying Pig was in, if they've got one, I want one. So I love the planners. Planners are fantastic. I'm thinking about ordering a set for my patio. Tell me what your lead time is. You said you built them?
I did.
Nice job.
I built everything on this patio, so
Is alcohol being served on the patio?
it is.
You need a gate for that.
Well, yeah, they don't have a permit. They don't have proper fencing. They don't have a lot of things. But my point is, I would not be at all in favor of granting a permit because of the circumstances that came about.
I wasn't here for the approval of the setback, as I actually was never really fond of that. But I do remember the discussions leading up to it, and I believe that was granted to the former owner, Manos, when he had it. And then it just kind of grandfathered into the new owners. But I agree, that was always, every design we ever got was that, the patio came up to the property line, and that was it. And I do think that is The patio was always to give the, kind of like the vestibule you got on 12 West. The thing is, well, we don't have any room on the inside for a vestibule, so we, need a vestibule, on the public right of way. Well, the other patios in town are basically in front of places that don't have a setback and don't have a room for a patio, so that's the accommodation for their situation, similar to the accommodation that has been essentially made for the vestibule, and I think it needs to basically be pulled back, as originally approved.
I have an idea, just thinking through it. If you take the two side planters off, bring the front line, bring it back to the property line. So you're losing what, one picnic table? Is that what's in that space, is just one?
There's a large picnic table there, yes.
And then adding benches on the public area against that wall for people waiting. I know 12 West has that issue.
That would still need a sidewalk use permit.
I think, but I think that would look nice
That would be
and,
more reasonable to ask for that much space as opposed to.
right. And it would fall in line with 12 West too, because I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to make the patios line up with the two.
Mhm.
So it looks like they're together but separate. However, I think if you push that line back, then you don't have to get approval for public sidewalk space, and then add some waiting benches out front.
Mhm.
Some wrought iron that match I don't know, just a
Well, I'm
suggestion.
gonna say, the placement of the benches even on the public sidewalk would still require a sidewalk use
Right.
permit.
But
Right.
still, I think that's better than.
But it's up to the city, right? It's up to the city to make that
Right,
determination.
that's outside our purview.
Let me ask a question then. So that's if it's their benches up against their fence, and obviously these are from our people. What if, as just a civic thing, they wanted to donate a couple of the benches that we already have downtown in other locations along Sandusky Street, and put a couple of those, because Wits has public benches in front of their place, so they're consistent with what's already downtown. The the city installed furniture, and it kind of solves that issue. But again, it's city property that you donate to the city, and you get additional waiting space. You go back to the original intent of the approval, and to me, that seems like that might be an option.
But it's also
Right.
not anything in our purview.
Right.
It's not.
Exactly.
I mean, that would be a discussion with the city. I think.
Right.
That
I
would
think
be with,
My
right.
suggestion would be roll it back to what, was approved, and then maybe pursue that line with the city as an option.
Okay. So, Diane, 5B, picnic tables and drink rails, you want to give us some color on that?
The picnic tables and the fabric umbrellas, those would comply with the standards. The majority of the picnic tables are on the private patio spaces.
Okay.
There is also another small drink rail tabletop that is off to the side of the private patio. And that is also, acceptable. Our standards indicate tables and chairs shall be comprised of metal or wood, and the color shall complement the storefront, and they do. Again, what's on the private patio. There is a picnic table on the public sidewalk, as we mentioned, so we'll need to have that discussion with Dave Epland.
Okay, so that nothing we need to look at there.
No.
5C, I know Dave, again, I don't know that we have much to talk about other than the design of it. It's half on public property. That's going to be an issue for the city and the applicant. So let's talk about, and that is, I don't know what pages, so it's that pole that they've got the lighting attached to. It's a big square stainless steel post, essentially.
May I rephrase that it's half on public property because
Okay.
it's technically not there. The pole is lined up on our property line. It's a square pole and it is on our property line.
Okay.
The base of the
It's
pole
the
that
base.
holds the pole up
Okay.
is riveted to the concrete. And so, yes, there are two rivets that
Okay.
are 2 inches or 3 inches onto property perhaps of the city, although I don't know even if it is, because I don't know where that line
Okay.
technically exists, but it would be a matter of inches, I can tell you that.
Okay, so that's the city. The design of it is us.
Right.
So again, this wasn't in the application. There was no upfront approval on this. What's commission thoughts on that?
Or, let Brian explain why he selected this pole.
Yeah, I mean, material-wise, the pole's made of stainless steel. Again, during our meeting in June, I discussed just real briefly with Diane wanting to do bistro lights out on the patio. That was discussed and said, absolutely, people do bistro lights out on the patio all the time. Just make sure that there's no LED or, really crazy, ugly looking lights out there. And so I too strung up the bistro lights and installed this pole. I designed the pole, I ordered the pole, paid for the pole, and then I installed it. So the pole is made out of stainless steel. The construction of it is 12 feet tall. It goes about just about 3/4 of the way up the building. It's not exactly 3/4 of the way up the building. And I have it lined at the edge of the building. I guess it would be west, or pardon me, the edge of the building west, correct? And on the south side of the property, the south corner of the property. As mentioned, the pole does have a base on it where there are 2 rivets on each side, so there are 8 rivets total, and 2 of those rivets may or may not go on to public property.
And that part for this commission isn't relevant.
Just describing it.
Okay.
That technically was just inserted into that pole just so people wouldn't lean on it and push it over. Yes, can it be used as a drink rail? It absolutely can be, but more so people aren't just leaning on it. I wanted to get away from putting in a ton of poles to hang up these lights, and the only way I could do it was by putting in one pole and a suspension cable to my building, and a suspension cable to a suspension cable to 14 and a suspension cable to 12, because I couldn't use Jack's building by any means. Not that I have a bad relationship with Jack, because I actually have a great relationship with Jack. Him and I get along really greatly. And maybe he would have let me use it, but that wasn't something I was going to ask for. So I decided to install the pole. Did I do it again out of noviceness and not get it approved? Absolutely. But what I was trying to do was solve a problem and put in a good material product that looked appropriate with the building. And that's,
so let's focus on that last part. Looks
Okay.
appropriate, if we
Okay,
could.
my concern with the pole is, and I don't have a problem with the pole, in theory, but we've always, essentially the standards don't allow for milled finishes. And to me, a stainless steel pole pretty much looks like, close enough to like a milled aluminum finish, whether it be, windows or doors or frames, window frames, that we've never allowed. We generally, all the railings downtown for the patios tend to be, of a wrought iron or something that, mimics wrought iron. So I think my big concern is not necessarily the pole, but the material, I think is, essentially not in keeping with the standards.
I would agree. I think it needs to be bronze, maybe a decorative touch on top. It looks contemporary.
Okay, Aaron?
Yeah, I think similar vein. I think if you think of the black pole that used to be in front of 14 West, the old, what was it called? The West End Tavern. It was black. The whole thing that goes across Winter Street for Buns, it's black. When you look at photos, there are poles everywhere. I don't have a problem with there being a pole, but I think, maybe if we paint it black or paint it a dark charcoal or something that does take off that
so if I could get it,
modern.
if I could get it powder coated, black, because that's all I could do to stainless. The only reason I got stainless, which is the absolute most expensive product that I could have built this pole out of. I mean, I could have done it with galvanized and painted it black easily, but I did it stainless so I wouldn't have it rust. But again, we would have had this discussion. You would have said, we'll paint it black or make sure it's black, and that's not a problem. And I wouldn't have gone stainless, so that's my problem. But I did it stainless so it wouldn't rust. So if my only options from a patina standpoint would be to powder coat it. Now I can powder coat it multiple colors, but the only thing that would make logical sense would be to match it to the fence, which is black. So why wouldn't I do it black? I guess is my thought. So if I need to do that, I just need to find out how I can do that. If I can do it on site, great. If I can't do it on site, that would mean that I would like to try to get some time to get it done.
It needs to be baked.
I'm not saying all the time in the world, or don't need 2 years to do it. I just need to figure out a time that's good to do it. And for me, that would be in the middle of winter, probably.
Let me ask a question. You know, I'm looking at the drink table. That's just got your usual round, probably galvanized, maybe not even galvanized.
The drink table, the drink rail around it?
Yeah.
Stainless steel.
So here you've got round.
Oh, that's all stainless steel, powder coated.
Okay, so that's great.
Yep.
The square seems wildly out of character. You know, if you look at the Bunds pole, if you look at light poles, if you look at everything around, again, your drink table legs are round. You know, all the conduit on the walls are round, the gutters are round. I'm wondering if the resale or the salvage on that square stainless steel wouldn't buy you a nice round galvanized, already powder coated, whatever, black round pole that would look much more in keeping with the fact that maybe that used to be part of a sign or something and you've repurposed it. Part of, I think the issue with this is there's no doubt that that was just stuck in there, right? There's nothing in a historic building downtown area that would be square, let alone stainless steel, certainly. Is there, I don't know that much about the resale value of stainless steel, but you know, kind of like you're talking about the door, there's people who buy this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Stainless steel, I know, is not cheap. Is it possible that you could sell this stainless steel, get a round pole that's already black or painted black or powder coated black and be done with it?
And replace it day of.
It would look a bunch better.
Look like what was there before almost, actually.
Yeah, I mean, and then I don't know, you haven't been around, but you actually, unfortunately, if your previous owner would have not cut it down, you had a grandfather, you know what the Bunds arch is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of had the same thing if you've ever seen pictures. It didn't go over the street, it came back over the sidewalk.
Sure.
Had a neon sign, West End Grill.
Right, that would be awesome to have.
You could have that. Unfortunately, once again, your previous building owner, property owner was short-sighted, cut it down, now it can't be replaced.
I will say that the drink rail poles, those are square. All the poles are square.
Why am I looking at it? It looks round.
If you look at the
base
on
is-
the base,
On
you
the
can kind of
yeah.
see
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So
That other picture you just had.
I would have, just so I'm making you aware, yes, that's an option I can definitely look into.
Okay.
But there would be now two different type material, not two different type materials, because that's stainless steel.
Oh,
If I powder coated the light pole, then it would match those poles exactly. If I changed it to round, then now I'll probably have to change those to round as well.
What about Commissioner Van Gundy's idea of putting some sort of a decorative cap on the top of it?
To make it look rounded, like a illusion.
It's just finished.
Yeah, like,
Like a knoll.
right.
Mhm.
And, I mean, you have the round centerpiece. I think too, when you paint it, powder coat it black, it's gonna soften those edges.
Yes.
And it's not gonna look so
Yeah.
square.
And that's fine. I was just offering up stainless
Yeah.
steel is an expensive material. You might look into if there's you know, you might be able to swap it out and not have to mess with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea though, if you put a cap on it or a finial at least, so it doesn't look like a 4x4 post just jutting out of the ground. And if it's powder coated, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I think round would have been better, but you know, I think at least, you know, it takes away most of what offends me as far as the looks of the current one.
Okay. So it looks like the flavor of the commission, we're okay with it. Powder coat or paint black. A suggestion, some sort of finial topper or whatever we want to call that.
You know, is that a suggestion or a correction? Because I think it really does need something.
Yeah.
It's up to you guys.
I think that ought to be it.
The only thing is there's nothing of that nature on that property.
Well, I know,
Or,
but
or,
There's nothing,
But-
well, you could say the same thing about the pole itself.
right.
And it's just gonna add to the booster lights. If you look at any booster lights, it has like a decorative pole.
Right, I guess the one thing I'm thinking of is matching it to the rest of the fence, because the rest of the fence is flat lined. It's all
Well,
just
you have
square.
the bushes, which add depth to that line. So I would say, on a design point, it doesn't look flat.
Right,
It can be really simple, not anything fancy. It could be
Just a ball.
a ball, yeah.
absolutely.
The Indians had.
I mean, even if it was just like a, you know, kind of almost like a
Pyramid,
pyramidal, you know, cap that you see on a, you know, a 4x4 deck.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the cost of it. I'm just thinking of the weld, everything to, because that's all welded up there. It's all flat, so it's
the
not
round hole
hollow.
sounding better.
I mean, the round pole would be expensive too. I'm just trying to think. I mean, that was about a $2,800 pole, so I'm just trying to think of how I can fix it as economically as possible. That's why I'm processing all suggestions.
Okay.
Understood.
All right, so moving on then, D is a hanging pallet garden. And you can see, if you look at that same picture that we were looking at the pole, if you look back at circled, there's pallets back there. They've shown an example of one, not theirs, but someone else's. You can see that they've painted the pallets, or at least the top part of the pallets, so it isn't just unfinished wood. I think staff called this out more than anything, just because we've never seen anything like that, so we don't particularly have any, there's nothing in the standards that calls out that, obviously. Again, in this case, it's on private property, so it's not even out. So it is the front of the building. I would call out a few things. Certainly Flying Pig built, an enclosure
Right, that was
to
the, right.
cover
the-
up the gas meters.
Right.
Now, it wasn't made out of pallets. The whole look and feel of this building has never been in particular 1880s Italianate anyway, by design. It's not something we want. It's a very visible part of the building because they have a setback. There's probably there's very few, certainly Buns could put them out on their patio if they wanted. I think really staff's just looking and to me for some sort of guidance, and that's why I'm here. Again, they'd be suspended by wires or bolted on. Staff's only recommendation, I think, is if they do it, that they don't cause damage to the wall as they're hanging that up. So what say ye?
I like it. I
Yeah.
think it's charming. I think it adds a nice little feature. The herbs are going to be used in the food.
Okay.
That was kind of the goal, to get the chef out in front of people.
Well, to that end, and to, I guess, acknowledge staff's concern about, how it's affixed. Is it possible to do it in such a way as it's, freestanding, it's got a base on it of some type to,
Not a ton of room over there, but I could look into it. That problem with that is that if somebody were to knock into it, that's a problem.
Right.
Like, you don't want it falling over on guests by any means.
they smell good.
It would smell good. Those guests would smell good. This was a secondary idea, actually. The original idea was temporary artwork. I think somebody else has down by the, what is it? The autistic school did a piece of artwork down.
There's the Art Ross Museum.
What's it called?
Creative Foundation.
Creative Foundations.
There's
Oh.
a large on the wall. Where I don't.
The mosaic behind the antique store.
No, the old
And that was permitted as a temporary piece of, temporary panel artwork.
And the Main Street, Delaware, down
That's
by
it.
the Strand, they have a temporary,
Statue, yeah.
right.
Sculpture. I should
So my original plan was to do a piece of artwork there. That's what I
Okay.
wanted to do. I wanted to do the original 8 settlers of Delaware in like a John Lennon Imagine character format, and then do a little story underneath it. It was a piece of artwork, and then I was thinking, okay, that might be a little out there for him, but I thought the history of, presenting history in the front of the building, or even rotating that artwork out by different people in town that might be artists would be a really cool thing to do. But then I went more simple. I got with David Hoy, who's with Stratford Ecological, and I said, hey, can we work together on perhaps working on this project if I were to get it approved? But this is such an afterthought. The pallets are like not a huge thing for me, but
Okay.
yeah, it would be awesome if they were there. If they don't get approved, no big deal.
It's nice.
I like it.
It adds to that farm to table concept on a small bird level.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So-
I have no problem with it as
Okay,
is.
so commission's okay with that
Is
as
it
long as,
possible to get some expertise on the masonry and make sure that that wet wood sitting next to the masonry
It's
isn't
really
a problem? That's my only concern.
Yeah.
I like it, I'm concerned about the brick.
Okay.
And I don't want,
Yeah, so maybe in the installation, if it can be done, one, without, damaging the masonry, and then two, if there could be some kind of a gap or something, when
Yeah.
it's installed, it's something that's not gonna transfer the moisture from the wet wood when it rains and such, that it'll keep it from,
I will say I did seal the masonry, so all the masonry is sealed. I did that myself too. I did
It's gonna
everything.
stay up all the time.
I am at this point, but we'll see. We'll see how long.
Times when you won't have road crossing.
Yeah.
You don't wanna pull them.
Yeah, I think that again, they,
time is fast.
if I were to,
Like 8 months
if I were to
ago.
ask for it, if I were to ask for this item to get it approved, obviously, I would ask for it as a temporary panel, with these plans to do this, and it would be something that you could remove. So it wouldn't be something that would live all year long by any means. Just like,
okay. So the last one on here then is the signage.
Yes.
I'm gonna go into that a little bit.
The applicant had submitted a COA application. The sign itself meets the sign code parameters in terms of its size. The materials, complement the storefront. So it is approvable under the architectural standards, but there was a little misstep in our office, and the sign permit to install it was issued prior to having the HPC approval. This is while I was away. And so this is backtracking and asking for HPC approval on the sign.
But it meets,
It meets all of the.
meets all part of the standards
Yes.
and code. Okay.
So I'm fine with administrative approval on that.
Okay. Okay, so Diane, we can get together, maybe email tomorrow if you want to put this into a form. And so based on a couple of things that we've talked about here, the flavor of the commission, it sounds like is go ahead and do administrative approval.
Yes.
Okay.
may
Awesome.
I speak just real quickly on the sidewalk permit and that space in particular? And I know,
You know, we don't have anything to do with that, right?
I know you don't.
Okay.
I'm aware of that, but it will matter if the boxes come into play, and you all have to approve the boxes on there, is my understanding. Is that correct? Or not?
The plant,
The planter boxes
The
to be
planter-
out on that sidewalk area?
No.
That's not you?
right,
Okay.
that is a separate,
Okay.
public
Then if
sidewalk.
if it doesn't have anything to do with you, I don't want to waste your time with them.
Okay. All right, so that took care of that part. Any other member comments? New business, old business?
I just have one very quick comment. I know the hour is late, but with the election of Chairman Hatton and Vice Chairman Cole, I think we are entering a new era as Historic Preservation Commission. And now that all of that is out of the way, we have that structure. I just wanted to kind of make a quick statement about that idea because, I think we really have an important trust and we have done a really excellent job. I've been on the commission 7 years. We've been around 20 some years now. And we have an important trust to the city and to the people to really adhere to these standards in a very humane and thoughtful manner. And the times when we have done that best, I think, is whenever we have made that extra effort to show respect to each other, respect to the citizens, respect to city staff. And I just want to seize this opportunity to reaffirm that moving forward, we continue with that spirit of respect and collaboration and integrity that has made us so successful.
You're here.
And that is all.
Thank you.
By the way, thank you for coming in this evening.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time and effort of everybody, especially you, Diane.
All right, if we do not have any other new business comments, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Second? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Hey,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.